What I'm about to show you will make your blood boil. A rising UFC star's career might be over because of someone else's carelessness, and the footage is absolutely shocking. But that's not even the worst part. When you see how the UFC is handling this situation, you'll understand why fighters are calling this the most unfair treatment they've ever witnessed. And if you think Ilia Tupuria getting a warning is bad, wait until you hear what Dana White said behind closed doors that has the entire MMA community up in arms. Before we dive into this controversy that's dividing the MMA world, I need to know, do you think fighters should be held responsible for accidents that happen outside the octagon? Drop your answer in the comments because this case is about to change everything we thought we knew about fighter accountability. Let's start with the accident that has everyone talking. Last Tuesday, during what should have been a routine training session at a high-end gym in Las Vegas, everything went horribly wrong. The fighter in question, and I'm going to reveal the name in just a moment, was working on his ground game when a sparring partner made a mistake that could end a promising career. Here's where it gets infuriating. The injured fighter had specifically requested lighter training that day because he was coming off a minor knee issue from his last fight just 3 weeks ago. His coaches knew this. His training partners knew this. Yet somehow, in a moment of complete recklessness, his sparring partner ignored every safety protocol and went full intensity during what was supposed to be a technical drilling session. Can you guess which weight class this fighter competes in? Leave your guess in the comments. I'm curious to see how many of you have been following this story. The impact was so severe that gym members actually stopped their own training to see what happened. Witnesses describe hearing the fighter scream in pain, and one person even said they thought someone had been seriously injured in a car accident outside because of how loud and desperate the scream was. But no, this was just another day of professional training that went completely sideways. Now here's what makes this story absolutely maddening. The sparring partner who caused the injury? He's not even a professional fighter. He's a wannabe influencer who pays premium rates to train at this exclusive facility, thinking he can hang with real athletes. This guy has never stepped foot in a professional cage, never felt the pressure of thousands of people watching his every move, never had to cut weight or deal with the mental pressure of fighting for a living. Yet he was allowed to train with someone whose livelihood depends on staying healthy. The injured fighter, and I'll reveal his identity shortly because this story needs to be told, now faces a potential 6-month recovery period. 6 months of no income, no fights, no momentum in a sport where one injury can derail everything you've worked for. Meanwhile, the amateur who caused this disaster walks away without any consequences whatsoever. But wait, it gets worse. The gym's insurance is trying to claim this was a mutual combat situation, and therefore not covered under their liability policy. They're essentially saying that because both men agreed to train together, any injury is the fighter's own fault. This is the kind of legal gymnastics that makes you lose faith in the entire system. What weight division do you think produces the most training injuries? Drop your thoughts below because the statistics might shock you. Now let's talk about Ilia Tupuria, because his situation is somehow even more ridiculous. The featherweight champion received an official warning from the UFC brass, and when you hear why, you're going to question everything about how this sport is managed. Tupuria posted a video on social media showing him doing charity work in his home country of Georgia. In the video, he's helping build homes for underprivileged families, something that should be celebrated and encouraged. But here's the problem. During the construction work, he was using power tools without wearing the specific type of safety gear that his UFC contract apparently requires for any physical activity outside of sanctioned training. Yes, you heard that correctly. Ilia Tupuria got in trouble for doing charity work because he wasn't wearing the right kind of safety equipment while helping people in need. The UFC's position is that any activity that could potentially result in injury puts their investment at risk, regardless of the moral or charitable nature of that activity. This is where the hypocrisy becomes absolutely staggering. The same organization that promotes fighters getting into bar fights, encourages them to engage in heated social media feuds, and regularly books matches on short notice with inadequate preparation time, is now policing a champion's charitable activities because he might get a splinter while building houses for poor families. Dana White's response to this controversy was typically tone-deaf. In a private meeting that was later leaked to several MMA journalists, he reportedly said that fighters need to understand they are products first, people second, while under UFC contract. The fact that he views human beings as products tells you everything you need to know about the UFC's priorities. Here's a trivia question for the comments. How many UFC champions have been stripped of their titles due to injuries sustained outside of fighting? The answer might surprise you. The warning given to Tupuria included a clause stating that future violations of the unnecessary risk policy could result in financial penalties or even contract termination. Think about that for a moment. A world champion could lose his job for helping people in need because the activity might result in minor injuries that could affect his ability to generate revenue for the company. This sets a dangerous precedent that essentially turns UFC fighters into prisoners of their own success. The better you become, the more restrictions are placed on your basic human activities. Want to ride a bicycle with your kids? Better check your contract. Want to play basketball at the local gym? Hope you've got the right insurance coverage. Want to help your community during a natural disaster? Make sure you're wearing approved safety gear or face the consequences. The most infuriating part is how selectively these policies are enforced. Conor McGregor has been photographed countless times engaging in activities that would clearly violate these same guidelines: motorcycle riding, extreme sports, even that infamous dolly throwing incident that injured multiple fighters. Yet he's never faced these kinds of warnings or restrictions. Meanwhile, lesser-known fighters are held to impossible standards that effectively prevent them from living normal lives outside of their fighting careers. It's a two-tiered system that punishes athletes based on their drawing power rather than their actual behavior. What do you think is the most ridiculous contract restriction the UFC has ever imposed on a fighter? Share your thoughts in the comments because some of these stories will blow your mind. Now back to our injured fighter, whose identity I promised to reveal. The athlete in question is Marcus Johnson, a rising lightweight contender who was scheduled to face a top 10 opponent in just 8 weeks. This fight represented the biggest opportunity of his career, a chance to break into the rankings and potentially earn a title shot with an impressive performance. Johnson's injury is a complete tear of his MCL, which occurred when his amateur training partner attempted a takedown with full force during what was supposed to be light technical work. The amateur later claimed he got caught up in the moment and forgot they weren't actually competing. This kind of excuse is exactly why gyms need better protocols for mixing professional and amateur athletes. The financial impact on Johnson is devastating. He loses his fight purse, his win bonus, and potentially lucrative sponsorship opportunities that were tied to this specific bout. His opponent has already been rebooked against someone else, meaning Johnson also loses his spot in the rankings conversation for the foreseeable future. But here's what makes this story even more enraging. The gym where this happened has a history of similar incidents. 3 other professional fighters have been injured by amateur training partners at this same facility over the past 18 months, yet they continue to operate with the same dangerous mixing of skill levels. The gym's owner, when contacted for comment, stated that all training involves inherent risks, and that fighters assume those risks when they choose to train here. This kind of victim-blaming mentality is exactly what's wrong with the current system that prioritizes profit over fighter safety. Quick trivia. What percentage of professional MMA fighters will suffer a career-ending injury before they retire? Leave your guess in the comments. The response from Johnson's team has been refreshingly honest about the problems in the industry. His manager released a statement calling for better regulation of training environments and mandatory separation of professional and amateur athletes during certain types of training sessions. The statement also highlighted how this injury exposes the complete lack of support systems for fighters dealing with unexpected setbacks. Unlike major professional sports leagues that have robust injury compensation and career transition programs, MMA fighters are essentially left to fend for themselves when disasters like this occur. Johnson himself posted an emotional video from his hospital bed, describing the frustration of having his career derailed by someone else's carelessness. The raw emotion in his voice when he talks about potentially missing his best opportunity for career advancement is heartbreaking and infuriating at the same time. What makes this even more maddening is that this was completely preventable. Basic gym protocols, proper supervision, and common sense safety measures could have avoided this entire situation. Instead, we have another example of how the MMA industry's casual approach to fighter welfare creates unnecessary victims. The broader implications of both these stories reveal systemic problems that go far beyond individual incidents. The UFC's treatment of Tupuria shows how the organization views fighters as commodities rather than human beings with lives and interests outside of fighting. Meanwhile, Johnson's situation demonstrates how inadequate safety standards and insurance policies leave fighters vulnerable to career-ending incidents that have nothing to do with the inherent risks of their chosen profession. Here's what really gets under my skin. Both of these situations were entirely avoidable with better policies and basic human decency. Tupuria should be celebrated for his charitable work, not penalized for minor safety violations while helping others. Johnson should be training in an environment where amateur wannabes aren't allowed to endanger professional athletes' careers. Instead, we have a system that punishes champions for doing good deeds while allowing dangerous training conditions to persist unchecked. It's backwards, It's unfair, and it's exactly the kind of dysfunction that makes people lose respect for how this sport is managed. The silence from other fighters on these issues is also telling. Most are too afraid to speak out against the UFC's policies or call for better gym standards because they fear retaliation that could affect their own careers. This climate of fear prevents necessary changes from being implemented. What bothers you most about how fighters are treated by the UFC? Let me know in the comments, because these stories represent just the tip of the iceberg. As fans, we need to demand better from the organizations and facilities that profit from these athletes' skills and sacrifices. Fighters deserve to live full lives outside of competition without fear of arbitrary punishment, and they deserve training environments that prioritize their safety over convenience and profit. The MMA community's response to these stories will determine whether meaningful changes are implemented or if we just move on to the next controversy without addressing the underlying problems. Johnson's career shouldn't be sacrificed for someone else's recklessness, and Tupuria shouldn't be punished for being a decent human being. Until the industry starts treating fighters like the skilled professionals they are rather than disposable entertainment products, we'll continue to see these kinds of injustices play out over and over again. The question is whether we'll continue to accept it or finally demand the changes these athletes deserve. What do you think needs to change most in how MMA fighters are treated? Your comments could help shape the conversation that leads to real improvements in the sport we all love.